Thank you, Michaela, for the invitation. I'm very glad to be here. My name's Anya. I'm coming to you from the US, somewhat indirectly, and I'm wondering if you'd be willing to stand up for like 5 minutes. I'm going to play a little sound piece that invites you to close your eyes and really do very tiny, tiny things. I'm not going to be asking you to do jumping jacks or something, but it'll be standing up and closing your eyes, and then I'll explain a little bit more. Cool. I invite you to stand and to put your hands on your hips. Take a deep breath. Maybe close your eyes. Now use the hands on your pelvis to tilt it, front and back. Let the cells of your body remember their oceanic, embedded history. Front and back, slowly. Keep going. Make the movements smaller and smaller until they are so small that they might be imperceptible to the outside. The smaller they look, the more grand they might feel on the inside. Take a deep breath. Now slide your hands such that one is on your tummy and the other on the back of your pelvis. Keep your feet firmly planted. Give yourself a push forward, ever so gentle, from the hand on your pelvis towards the front. Without taking a step, can you feel a wave travel through you? Travel up the river of your spine into your neck. Let your neck roll when the wave gets there. Reverse the wave. Push towards the spine with a hand that's on your tummy. Feel the body sway gently, front and back.
you just did was a small dance that you are free to repeat throughout today.
Thank you, everyone, for doing that. There are a couple of things in that piece that sort of display what I'm interested in. You heard, especially towards the end, kind of these drone electronic-y sounds. And that was actually isolated from hydrophone recordings, and it was just noise, like ship noise, like that I isolated and then realized, whoa, there are really cool harmonics in it. And so kind of curiously, all the like crackly stuff was not, like pretty in a traditional musical sense. It was filled with this proto-rhythmic kind of messy information. But the noise, the actual noise, that anthropogenic noise that we're generating in the ocean, was somehow really melodic and harmonic and beautiful. So I found that problematic and curious, and wanted to explore that. And in general, I work with that binary between signal and noise, and how most of the time it's actually not very clear which one is which, and especially when we're working with the ocean. Where does signal start and end, and for whom, right? So all that crackly kind of stuff, a lot of that was shrimp, that was crustacean making sounds. But if we don't know that, you're not an oceanographer, not working with it, it kind of just sounds like messy noise. Whereas like these very pure tones that are harmonizing into minor ninths and these beautiful harmonics, that is noise that humans are generating. So I find that problematic very interesting. And then the indications to move the body and to feel, more and more I've sort of come to really value embodied processing of any kind of information, but especially what is noise and what is signal, and really thinking of not just the human body, but the various bodies that a human contains as technology that offers not only endless inspiration, but endless logics within it that complicate the noise and signal ratio in many ways. I actually came to this work in kind of a strange way. I recently finished a PhD, and that's me defending my PhD from a bathtub. The pandemic called for innovation. But yeah, I studied history of logic, history and philosophy of logic, focusing on non-binary dynamic logics that people were experimenting with at the start of the 20th century in Russian-speaking world, so late Russian Empire before the revolution. And I discovered all of these, fascinating actors, fascinating characters. Some of them were artists, some of them were logicians, some of them were philosophers, people who were thinking about creative technology in a way that really speaks to what we talk about today, like postmodernism, post-humanism, post all sorts of things. Of course, they weren't reacting to modernism to create anything post, but they fundamentally did not want logic to be something that's disembodied. They did not like this sort of Western European, distinction between subjective and objective. They thought that's really weird. And so as a way of sort of coming close to them, empathizing with them, I'm going to use Francesca's word, I was trying to create, scores for improvisation, scores for making music, scores for performing, to understand what does that mean for a logic to be embodied. And I'm going to play just a snippet of a piece that, it resulted in an album, but just a fragment of it. It's called Mythologicking, and it's working with this idea of proto-rhythm. So, having rhythmic snippets, working with breath and embodied technology, but not quite having beats, or like always sort of stopping short of being, having a clear meter. Okay. Stop there in the interest of time. I'll stop there in the interest of time, but it goes on to keep exploring that, and if you were to try to move to that, it would be like you can't quite get into a groove in a sense, and that's a problem, but at the same time it invites kind of a non-passive listening. As a human body container, you can't let these faculties, this technology, just sort of let that sound pass through you. Somehow intention has to be engaged in order for you to try to find rhythmicity amongst the proto-rhythmic information. That's my curiosity with sound and body. And right now I'm working on, this is very recent research, but I'll just show a snippet of it as I'm talking. I've been exploring the land-water boundary, and boundary is in quotations because, of course, that's never defined boundary. It's constantly changing and morphing. And I've been spending time on various land-water boundaries, oceanic, seas, lakes, sand, rock. And I was really intrigued from that very first snippet where you saw me with an accordion on a ship, the relation to gravity, the way that when you're at sea, that gravity just feels different. It's not, you really feel gravity being the ability of a massive body to curve space-time rather than, kind of like what we learn in middle school, a force pushing down. It's not that simple. It's complicated and it's dynamic. And inhabiting this land-water boundary, I'm trying to, in some way, unterrestrialize, in some way feel the multiplicity of bodies that are within a human body. And also, this isn't about signal-to-noise ratio in some sense, but it is about kind of breaking the various binaries, because the fascinating thing about body being a technology is it can perform a number of binaries, right? Like there are only in certain ways that an elbow will bend, and then there are ways that an elbow won't bend. So, there are very clear, like, yes, no, 0, 1 relations. But at the same time, the body is such a fundamentally dynamic entity, it will continue to offer new logics and new ways to problematize and deepen any kind of binary relation. So, like after spending, 6 hours on this particular beach, just feeling the difference in the sand depending on how high or how low the tides are. Like literally my relation to gravity, depending on whether that sand is really hard after it had dried, after the tides have become low, or it's constantly getting wet and my feet are actually like digging into the ground, and if I just stand there for, 2 minutes, then the sand comes up like maybe to my ankles. Like all of that makes the experience of the same site, the same locale, so fundamentally dynamic. Okay, I'll move on. And most of this research has been in conversation with and in collaboration with this group called Ocean Memory Project, which I've had the privilege to get to know over the last few years. And I'm just putting that out there. It has the link as well if you want to check them out beyond what I'll say today. But Daniel Cohn and Jody Deming were the two people who started it, and the group is really, it's a combination of oceanographers, activists, artists, Indigenous scholars, scholars in the humanities who are uniting these concepts of ocean and memory, both of which are really fundamentally dynamic entities, to let both of them teach and kind of enlighten the current, present, human, anthropocentric situation about really the dimensionality of ocean and of memory, and to really kind of get us out of a stasis in the current problematic we have facing, anything between climate justice and ecological ways of being that we're trying to maybe re-inhabit following this pandemic. And the project I joined was a cruise in the Salish Sea, which was in the Coast Salish lands and waters, known otherwise as the area around Vancouver, so just across the border from Northwest US. And we had various Indigenous people, First Nations people join that cruise, who were talking about what ocean memory means to them in their lands and in their waters. And so this is very much a piece, it's a work in progress, it's a sound piece where I'm trying to, it's a little bit ethnographic, but I have a lot of recordings of Western scientists, oceanographers, talking about what ocean memory is to them in the Salish Sea. And that is, Salish Sea is extremely anoxic, so there's very low oxygen content. And for oceanographers and for astrobiologists, that's fascinating because that's a reflection of very early Earth, where the oxygen content in the ocean was very low, right? So that's almost kind of like peeking back in time and having this ocean remember. And the Indigenous narrative there is, well, we have all of these cultural practices that you don't have data for. You don't know what kind of species lived here, 50 years ago, and you don't know how ecologically they were interconnected. But through storytelling, through oral history, through the kinds of, practices of anything from building canoes, what kinds of canoes out of what kind of wood, to aerating beach sands and digging them every year in order to actually increase the oxygen content to allow certain organisms to grow. There's also a huge narrative of ocean memory and the fact that ocean, for them, doesn't stop with the land-water boundary, right? So their idea of land is very much land and ocean. Their idea of ocean is very much ocean and land. So do I have time to play an excerpt from it? Or yeah, okay. I'll play just an excerpt.
Follow our cultures. What happens in our life is totally up to the individual, and that's why I stay the way I am. Because of the name I carry, He was a war chief that fought under Chief Joseph. So He carried a war whistle, I carry a prayer whistle.
We're curious about the knowledge that you can share. You know, like when you talk about customary laws, or they're information for us to see the world differently, or to understand how to be in this waterway. You know.
And it goes back to the storytelling. When you talk about stories, that's where you're actually, a lot of our information, if we have some, is from our elders, and we have to actually auto record them.
Butterballs,
So,
teal, shags, black ducks, mallards, pigeons, golden eyes, butterballs, teal. Sanachina used to be the second most populated in BC for octopus, which used to be a stable part of our diet routes. You're lucky you used to catch those little ones now, where we used to catch the ones with the big long arms on them. Everything is just overfished, over-controlled by the government. And we're still stopped at gunpoint. When we're out hunting, fishing, clam digging, we're still stopped at gunpoint.
Big marine heat wave was like 2014, 2015 or so. And in those years, we noticed, reduced densities of birds and mammals, reduced densities of phytoplankton and zooplankton. The warmer temperature years, generally we have less biology going on.
When we tell these stories, because with the truth and reconciliation going on, they say, oh, you people, why don't you just get over it? So when I'm teaching at the university or the prison or wherever, whatever school, because I hear that from someone in the crowd as well, why don't you people just get over it? Well, when they tried to beat the human spirit,
I'll fade out there. And just to mention, voice as a non-contradiction is a very important driving force for this piece, in the way that, Climate Justin has to be inclusive of Indigenous voices, and Western science does not have to be in contradiction to it. Like, there is a way that this Cruise and Ocean Memory Project is very much trying to have allyship. And that's it. Thank you so much for your attention.